These are the beautiful cactus that bloom in my mom's yard every spring. And as soon as I saw these, I thought, I've got to try those as canes. These are the kinds of canes that are encased, like the coral or the lampwork morini. This is what they look like, both flattened and encased in the cane. So 2 different versions. I'll be showing the orange one today. So this is for the very center. And if you've ever noticed with flowers, it's hard to make the center small enough. So what I'm going to do is use this amount of clay to make a center that I will save for later. So right now I'm going to make that a little star shape for the center of the flower. It looks like the orange is covering the entire side, but there's not. There's definitely space in the middle to make a little asterisk with a space in the middle, although you're not going to tell the difference. This is going to be so tiny. So I wrap that in clay. And again, take a look at the size, but if you could make it a tiny fraction of the size, then it would still be big enough. I just want enough for future cactus flowers. Besides, these make the prettiest little stars for other kinds of canes. So it's the very center. I could stop right there, or I could add more. I'm going to add a little yellow around it. So I've tapered the edge. I've cut a bevel cut because this one is going to be wrapped twice. Its thickest setting, I want a lot of translucent around that yellow. This is going to more than double its size. That's why I used so little yellow, because doubling it, wrapping it with that much translucent quickly makes it a large cane. So now I'm cutting another bevel cut, trying to make it look match it so that every part of it is double. I didn't quite do that, but it doesn't matter at all. So now, as always, the trick is wrapping the center. I've cut it into 12 sections, I think. And as you can see, isn't going to work out. So at this point, I'm going to flatten and stretch it. This is easier than you think and very doable. So whenever you have a cane, a border cane, or anything long like that, it can be stretched, flattened, squished. You can absolutely change the size. Or you can change the size of the center. You can make it bigger or smaller and keep testing until you have just the right amount. This will still be too much for the center. So now I have some star center left, and some of this extra will be left over. You'll see when I roll it out that I don't need that much. But in total, that's really not that much clay. So you can make it smaller, or you can just make it easy on yourself and do it about that size. Here I have 3 shades of cadmium red. It needs to be light. I wish I could make it brighter, but specifically for these encased beads, the part that's shown needs to be light, otherwise it won't show through the translucent. The translucent makes shadows in the depths, so the back is the darkest, and the inside of the petals is the lightest. I've realized that when you squish these flat, they almost look transparent, so I need to I've started to make the petals thicker, for those of you who've tried maybe the daffodil cane or something. So here it is, a nice thick petal with a color gradient. And now I want this to only cover about half that translucent. It's white, it's Primo brand white translucent. And I want kind of a petal shape or a diamond shape, but I want that translucent poking out, but not too much. So I'm readjusting, spreading out that tapered and squished edges all the way down, but not completely wrapping it. So cut off the excess. And now I'm going to want to eventually really pinch that top of the petal really sharp. But I also want to pinch the translucent coming out, because that's going to be add the space that's needed between the petals in the center. And this, thank goodness, it's not like our normal kaleidoscopes. These do not have to be perfect. In fact, a little chaos is good. It's nature after all. Any part where that curves almost all the way around will add sort of a fold in the petal. You might have seen it. So there we go. I keep pinching both sides. And this is what it looks like at the end. I'm going to want to wrap that around the center. So just to show you, there's the little star center left over. Again, we have plenty of this center. I want there to be 7 petals. So I'll cut the petals first and then figure out how much I need of the center. First, and this is important regardless of the shape or size or number of petals, with this encased technique, everything gets wrapped in translucent. So you'll need a lot of translucent to start out with, at least 4 ounces, depending on the size. Make sure you have plenty to start out with. So here I'm wrapping that petal in translucent. I may or may not attach it at the end that already has translucent, but this up at top, all of that, I guess I'll probably end up wrapping the whole thing. That cadmium needs to be completely covered in translucent. I could have just wrapped it. I decided to cut it and reattach it like this so that it'd have a nice sharp point. I was afraid if I wrapped it, it would all just kind of go blah. Every stage you'll have to be very careful for air bubbles. I'm trying to get the air bubbles out here. And again, I really wanted that to be pinched. I didn't even get it pinched as sharply as I would like, but there's more pinching. This will actually be 14 petals, but the first 7 are going to be twice as big as the background 7. So cut off 1/3 and set that aside. We'll use that later. And the 2/3 that are left over, the longer one, cut that into 7 pieces. You know, it doesn't matter exactly. It could be 5, it could be 8. I think the pink one is 8. But this one is 7. And now that I know how long 7 is, if you look, as far as proportions to the center, I know that can be tricky at first. That's when I cut off the center, when I have the center the same length and the correct, what looks like a good proportion to the petals. And so now I'm trying to squish the petals around that center. Next, I need to tuck in 7 little back petals. So this one will need to be further reduced so that they fit in there. So I'm going to keep squishing. This especially needs to be pinched. And my forefinger and thumb make a nice curved pinch so that, you know, the front petals are curved. It's a little curved space that's going to want to fit into. But by pinching it, I can get it to fit in there. Once I have the shape I want, I can reduce it simply by twisting and running it through my fingers. Again, pinching every part of it to make it sharp and crisp. So I want to stretch it out so that I can get 7 of them the same length as those first petals. I'm going to just tuck them in there, leaving a little space on either side. for the last part. It's about 2.5 centimeters tall, or about an inch tall. And if you can see the green in between those flowers, it really helps to separate them. So that's what I'm going to add now. I have sandwiched just a green strip in between a double of that in translucent. So all that is a tiny little green strip squished between two strips of translucent, and from there I kind of squished it into a bit of a triangle, a really sharp triangle, and that I cut into 14 sections, and those go on either side of those back petals. It'll really help to add some definition between flowers when they're all stacked on each other. And then as I reduce it, they all fit nicely together. I love that part. Wrap in a sheet of translucent. And reduce. The cane is going to be a lot smaller than the resulting pattern. That came from a slice that small because of the way you squish it. The nice thing about this cane is you don't have to be perfect at all with the slicing. You can slice off a nice big thick slice, and then you turn the slice inside out. The middle either will smear or crack. If it's too soft, it'll smear. If it's too cold, it'll crack. So you have to work with that a little bit. Now, as I'm turning it inside out, well, not exactly turning it inside out, but I'm going to squish this almost paper thin. For all my other ones, I've noticed people have a very hard time. They ask me why it looks so cloudy. It's because it's not thin enough. The 3D effect is only an illusion. These are thin canes, and they can be flattened. If your hands are too warm, you'll have to give it a break as you're flattening it. But they can be flattened. This one I'll make into a cabochon. They can also be, of course, made into beads or veneer. However, even with a veneer, I've noticed for all of these, the illusion of depth is better if it's somehow bent a little bit, like has a dome to it. So the cabs or the beads or anything rounded creates more of an illusion of depth. See how the center got sprayed out and how you can barely see some of the curls in the leaves? It's more difficult to make the tiny flowers. It's hard to even explain how tiny they need to start out, since I'm going to be making them bigger. These haven't been sanded or varnished or anything. I wanted to show you right out of the oven how they can look. I probably will either sand these or coat them in resin, or probably both. But first I just wanted to show you they still have depth.